So, how do I do this one? This one is probably the most abstract and difficult explanation I've ever attempted. So, I've been meditating very deeply on the metaphysics of love and what it means to love somebody. And I really wanted to help people who didn't fully understand love to understand it better. And so, what I've been thinking deeply about is the nature of the self relative to the emotion of love. And the way I think about it is that, like, there's selfishness, which is peak self love, and taking everything for themselves, right? And is generally an undesirable trait, to the opposite spectrum, which is complete selfless love, which is the ultimate in not having a self and giving energetically outward with nothing in need of return. And so that's the metaphysic right there. It's like when you are loving, it's a question of where do you direct your energy, um, and the way you want to do that is to give it without asking for something in return. Because when you are asking for something in return, you're not loving. You're actually exchanging. And that is where all of the hurt comes from when you love somebody and then your relationship ends because you have an expectation of return and you're not receiving it. Then you feel hurt, or there is some benefit that comes from the relationship, and when it is gone, you are no longer happy with yourself because you were dependent on the other person for that happiness, which is exactly why they left you, because you were taking from them. So, in order to perform selfless love, you first have to love yourself and to be whole in yourself. And so, this is what got me thinking is that, like, where love comes from is understanding. There's other things like acceptance and forgiveness that are a big part of what it means to love somebody unconditionally. But both of those things come from understanding. So, like, acceptance is to not judge someone or something, no matter what they're like. And forgiveness is to not take hurt when you experience the loss of the thing. And the way that happens both times is through understanding. So, like, one of the examples I was thinking of is the guitar example. And say you want to play guitar and it's really, really hard because you don't understand how to play guitar. Um, and so that lack of understanding is what creates the frustration of playing guitar and why you hate it. But if you put in the energy to understand how to play guitar, you would love playing guitar. In fact, it is the only way you can put that kind of time and effort into it. There's a direct correlation between how much time and energy you put into something and your love of it. But that is what it means to love something. So if you can think about loving inanimate activities with love, then that's the same thing that you would do with when you love somebody, and that is to invest your time and energy into that person, and then to accept them for who they are by understanding who they are, and then to forgive them for not meeting your expectations by understanding that is who that person is, right? And that's how we think of love. So when you have these negativities that you carry with you, they take away from the relationship. And what you feel when you feel feeling love is the remediation of those negative feelings you have about yourself, and being in love and receiving validation from somebody else is making you feel whole because you have somebody else to fill that hole for you. But in so doing, right, you're subjecting all of that negativity onto the person that you think you're in love with. And that's what creates attachment. And so if that's the state you're at, like, I mean, that's fine. You can live like that. But if you want to experience love without hurt, right, at the loss of love, then you need to complete yourself. And I was thinking about this too, and it's like the fundamental thing that we need to understand, one, to complete ourselves, but two, to like understand another, are the human condition, and that's suffering and loneliness. So none of us escape suffering and none of us escape loneliness. We're all, I think it's Donnie Darko, and he goes on about everybody dies alone and nobody wants to die alone, but that's just what happens, is we all die alone. Um, and that's a tough thing to accept, but understanding that is that like you live your own life, and even though you share your life experiences with every other person that you share life experiences with, ultimately like you die your own death when you die, and that is something we all have to struggle with. So there's this loneliness that is inherent to the human condition, is that like we're only the personhood that we are, or that we think we are. We don't really exist. And we're all like that. So like not only are other people like that, but you yourself are also like that. And when you were feeling alone, right, and you feel a negativity in the prospect of being alone, and you feel a negativity in the prospect of dying alone and being afraid of death, then you reach out to other people for a replacement, or maybe you're engaging in escapism from reality, which is another sad coping mechanism that leads nowhere really because of the way desires work. Um, and then there's the suffering, and so that is like, is to understand that you aren't suffering in being alone, and that we all have physical sufferings. So the way you love somebody else is to understand that everybody, like somebody else, is also alone, and that they are also suffering. And that's what takes you to acceptance and forgiveness, is because when you understand that they're alone and that they are suffering, and that is the cause of their behavior, then acceptance and forgiveness come easily. It's like, you're driving on the highway and somebody rushes around you and cuts you off to merge in the lane. And you're like, why did you cut me off? And you're frustrated because you take it personally that you had to lose speed while you were driving in your lane. And in order to find peace in this situation, you have to extend the understanding to the other driver and understand that they were suffering and they were feeling threatened in whatever lane that they were in, and that's why they merged. Or maybe they were in a rush because of whatever reason, or maybe they're just selfish and you said, oh well, like it's their own suffering at that point. And sure, like it hurts that you had to like lose your speed, but it's not personal. So it is only like you feeling hurt over the loss of your speed. And if you were actually whole and detached from how fast you are going, and not being, and in so doing, like not being attached, you can not feel hurt from that loss of speed and let it go and just be like, well, I'm on my path anyway, and it is part of my path. It's like, like you're walking down the path and, excuse me, like a tree falls down in front of you. You can take it personally that the tree fell down in front of you, but we all know that the tree fell for some other reason, and it did not have a personal reason to impede your path. In fact, you should probably practice some gratitude for not having some worse scenario occur in either the car driving or the tree scenario. So that's it. That's how love works. It's the giving fully of yourself and not taking anything in return. Because the taking in return is what leads to loss and the hurt. And the way to overcome the loss and the hurt is to let go of yourself by loving selflessly. And the way that works is to understand that there is a loneliness and there's a suffering to every human existence. And when you understand that about yourself and understand that about others, you can practice the highest level of love. And then you're peaceful and happy all the time, which would be much better than becoming attached, feeling the constant pain of attachment. Imagine you're feeling attached to somebody because they think you're beautiful, and you are filling your own poor self-esteem with their validation that you are beautiful. Now you are dependent on that person for their compliments of your physical beauty to regulate your low self-esteem. And then when that person is gone because they're tired of trying to convince you that you are beautiful even though you don't believe that about yourself, then you will no longer feel the loss of that person leaving and no longer feeding you those compliments. Instead, you have to work on your wholeness, which is to understand that you are alone and you are suffering, and your inadequacy comes from a desire to be something outside of yourself. And that, like, you want something that you cannot have, or you would have already taken the steps to have it. So, like, in understanding your own limitations, you can find acceptance and complete yourself. What else did I really want to like bring up in this video? There was this idea that like there is selfless love, like no matter what your framework is. Okay, so like the selfless love is kind of a very Buddhist idea in my mind, because the Buddhists believe in the no self, and Jesus preaches love, and who else preaches love? Socrates wrote, Plato wrote the Socratic Dialogue of the Symposium, where he talks about the same concept. His example actually was really nice, is that like it cannot be a thing that you love, because when that thing is gone and you still love it, there's the true love can't be dependent on that thing. Because when your great grandmother dies, right? And if your great grandmother dies, and I'm sorry for your loss, but of course she was going to pass anyway, and you loved her and you continue to love her after she is gone, because love is not about receiving anything. It's 100% the choice, the conscious choice of giving an understanding to your great grandmother and her death. Like I would even want to call it divine love, because there's God believers out there who also identify with the divine, God's love. It's like Khalil Gibran. He says, say not that God is in my heart. Instead say, I am in the heart of God, from the prophet. You don't have to believe in God. All you have to do is to understand that, like, God is the way things work. Like, he made all the rules, right? Like physics says, like, there's rules to the universe, right? And you don't understand the rules and you're frustrated until you understand the rules, and you're like, well, there was nothing to do but accept the circumstances, right? And the way I think of that is that, like, when you were dealing with somebody who is very, very selfish, well, like, you can still love this person and you can still understand that they are suffering and that they're lonely, and that is the reason that they take endlessly for themselves. And you can also choose not to engage with that person. You know, it's actually really mind blowing. Just crossed my mind. It's like the way in physics you have black holes and you have stars, and like the black holes just take energy in completely and just suck it in constantly, and stars just outwardly direct energy constantly, and like this is like the two ultimate extremes. And I think it's really cool how like there's a microcosm of the human soul in the grand scope of stars, which is, you know, how coincidental is it? Do we just imagine the universe the way we are ourselves because that's how we imagine things? Yeah. Thanks for watching.